Righto, we got everyone? Beautiful. So, as I said to the previous group, no one would ever be able to put up with me for another hour-long session or 40-minute session like this morning. But we've had now numerous other sessions and lots of time to mull over or ruminate on any potential questions. So, actually opening it up to you guys to you would have had some thought moments or light bulb moments come on, and when I opened up this morning I said that chances are you're gonna go home with more questions than answers. Well, guess what, here's an opportunity for you to actually get some of those questions answered before we go home. So and didn't have a Q&A session after that first one because I went over time. So yeah, I'm going to open it up to you guys. The last group had some questions, and I'll open them up. First one was around the use of mulching as a tool, and as far as pasture management was concerned. And it's probably important to remember with the likes of this one that we do have to be careful about where the plant was sitting in its growth phase and the time of year before we go and mulch. So if we think about it, if we had a plant that was semi-reproductive and we were getting into, say, April, May period, and you would have remembered when I spoke this morning about when the plant goes reproductive, our roots start to shrink up and the requirement then for rainfall to re-stimulate. So if I've got that plant, that one there's got the seed head up, and I've got a leaf here, and a leaf there, and a leaf down here. So, and he's gone to seed, and I go, I want to extend my feed value, and I come and mulch it, and I come and mulch it down here. I have to be mindful that I have got a chance of getting some regrowth because I've got that one solar panel there, but because underneath my root system, which was big, is now back here, I can be in trouble of cutting it back and not getting it to respond because I don't have the moisture availability to that bigger root zone. Because chances are, at that time of year, unless we get some late rain, my moisture is going to be sitting down here somewhere. And if that root isn't sitting in that country, I'm not going to get the response that I was looking for. So we do have to be mindful of that. I said that the plants, most of these plants are a 5-leaf plant, so that flag leaf. So when we want to mulch, we actually, if we know we're going to come into that time of year and we want to extend our quality, we've probably got to be coming in, if we can't get pressure on our country, or we do it after we've done a graze. Ideally, that's the best way. Get a graze, get some pressure on it, and then come in and knock it out. We don't want it to be showing any flag leaf, which is the last leaf before head exertion, to do it, because we've got to be mindful of where the roots are. The other part to mulching, and this was learnt, I learnt this through accident more than good science. So tropical grasses, they frost at 6 degrees. They don't frost at 0, they frost at 6 degrees. Now, when we mulch and we train our plant to have a low growing point, and we do it at, in that April, March, April period, we get mulch on the ground, but we also create a bit of bare dirt. So when we get bare dirt, we've got less hours of sunlight, but that sunlight is coming down that ground and the soil is actually capturing that. So then when we get to night temperature, that then rises up and it helps keep the warmth above the growing point. And so we actually enable a plant to avoid getting frosted compared to stuff when we've got a growing point up here and we've got mulch and it gets to 6 degrees up the top here, cuts out that growing point and the plant doesn't respond. So, we've got to understand where the plant is in its production cycle, but we can use it to manipulate what our soil temperature is doing to actually help create that length of season. It's as I say, that was done by accident. Lakina trial where I planted in May, and we get frost usually in June, and so I worked on the theory that bare dirt means solar radiation, and ironically it worked. And we had frost that year, quite heavy frost, didn't get affected. And once you start peeling it back, you see it's about that bare earth. But it's all right to have bare earth at that point because we're not going to get any heavy rainfall, but then we do have to manage our season then when we're coming out to October, November, that we actually do want to have some mulch on the ground so we can get our moisture infiltration. So it's a balancing act in understanding how you graze, you use mulching and your grazing system to keep enough cover so you've got it there for that period of time, but at this point in time to extend our growing season. So, you know, and mulching, like my guys have got numbers around, like they've got bigger mulches and they're sort of 40 to 50 bucks a hectare. And if we look at that, you know, we can throw it another way. That if we had to go buy hay now, for instance, you know, you're probably paying 400 bucks a tonne for hay. So it's 8 hectares for a tonne of hay. If I can change, now, if I didn't mulch and I just had this big haystack, and we got talking about this before with the last group around signal grass, and it's about how we manipulate the flowering points or the flowering dates with these plants. They're still going to go to seed at some point, but the more we manage them at the beginning of the season will determine how much head initiation we get in here. And we're never going to remove aerial tillers, and aerial tillers still produce seeds, but it's about getting rid of most of the bulk. But if I left that standing, chances are I'm going to utilise 10 to 15% of that feed. The rest is going to get wasted. If I come in and mulched it and only grow half the amount of feed, because of how a beast comes, so this beast here is, you know, that's his gob. He's got his tongue around that. So he's going to get a percentage of stem and a percentage of leaf. So there's going to be probably more fibre than there is energy in that. And I'll get to do a test tomorrow, anyone that's coming to the grazing forum, about how you look at plants and how much energy you expand. But that there, you know, I said about the 15,000 bites per day. Well, yeah, I might get my 0.8 of a gram per bite there, but it's going to have a lot of stem. Whereas if I mulched this and the beast is coming down on it, he's get a greater percentage of leaf. So therefore, whilst I only got half the amount of feed potentially on offer, I'm going to turn that half amount of feed into better utilisation and better kilos of beef. So, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean about how much you've got standing there. It's actually about how much we're turning back into kilos. So that was one of the things, and hopefully that might have stimulated some comments or questions from the floor now.
Grass too low with the slash, you're going to reduce its return rate.
Yes, so especially if you don't, so it's all about looking where the leaf is. You've got to have a bottom solar panel and cut it off above that bottom solar panel.
Between that, and more out of curiosity, if you burnt that old dry grass, it seems to come back a lot better.
So when you burn, it will change the sugars in the plant. Now, the catch to that is, and it's because you burn it, and you're never going to burn everything completely to the ground level, but you get that rush of sugars, whereas if you slash it, you don't get those rush of sugars afterwards. So that's the first one. But I'll also challenge that sometimes that's a short-sighted view. Like if I looked at it, didn't mind burning, but when you start looking at what happens to your system from a burn, you know, we look at speargrass country. If you burn speargrass country every year, guess what? You don't have any legumes in your country. You don't have any legumes in your country. You're instantly reducing your total carrying capacity. You know, the work was done in the 70s in the north where it showed that 50% of your biomass made up of stylos in a speargrass country, you double your carrying capacity. But you know, a burn every 2 years, you're basically going to reduce that population. So, and then when we throw in things like, say, rat's tail grass, the DAF I posed this question to the Maiden DAF researcher earlier this year. They actually never done any work around how old a rat's tail plant, or the lifespan of a rat's tail plant. We discovered in some of our own individual grazing trial stuff, it's about 8 years and that plant dies. And that's where there's no fire in the system. And we've got an instance, we've got a road, we burn one side of the road and we've left the other for 8 years. And where we burn, we have 100% dominance of rat's tail. On the other side, there might be, and it was 100% dominance of rat's tail on the other side, but because of the change of burning, we've encouraged the other grasses. Now rat's tail might make up 10% of the population. And that was the only change in management, was taking fire out of the equation. And the legumes that have come back in that country, and we've seen this, but it's a slow burn. Like, it was 8 years to see this change, and most people probably wouldn't stand the test of time to see that process through, and they'd lose faith. But we had plenty of paddocks that were trialling different other stuff on, so it was about having a look at what else we can do. So, whilst fire is good, to me, there's a lot more in it for us by not burning. And instead, if we had that situation, I'd be trying to use high density bloody dry cows to be my bulldozer or my slasher to get on top of it more than anything else. Yep. So it's a combination. You use both. Like, it's not just urea. It's about first and foremost getting your phosphorus right. So you got to. So all of our tropical pastures, grasses, from the dairy work that was done back in the 80s, showed that, and it's really interesting. So I don't know how many of you know the real spread of rat's tail in the day. So we actually used to have a seed certification in Queensland, and so dairy farmers used to get supplied certified seed. So, and it was at that point in time, as Rhodes grass was the seed production, and so we had high phosphorus levels, and they were getting the certified seed. Ironically, the certified seed was inspected, and every piece of machinery, every cleaning machine had to be inspected to be free of weeds to be classified as certified seed. That seed was 3 times the price of the stuff that was getting sold over the fence that wasn't certified. Now, what happened was that the certified stuff was free of rat's tail, the uncertified stuff wasn't, and that was about the same time when there was lots of bulldozers clearing scrub up and down the coast on low phosphorus soils. And lo and behold, that's how that story happened. But, so we've got a couple of things where we could, if you ever get the ear of MLA and government, we need to get it back seed certification so we can actually be better. Like, producers actually need to start valuing their feed that they grow. The only way we do that is by valuing the seed that we buy. And so, and we need to be doing that better, and there's no standards within the industry around that. But so then we fast forward from the learnings from the dairy systems and the grazing systems, it was understood that the phosphorus was the driver to our performance and our production of our tropical grasses. And they found, like, you could, depending on which DAF person you talk to, you'll get 3 different answers as to what the magic number is. But what John Reeve found in his biosecurity trial work was that 35 milligrams per kilogram was the magic number to make our grasses run on all 8 cylinders. So, but then as 35 milligrams per kilogram in a soil test. Most of our soils will be less than 10. So, and then as a result of that, that treatment is always done in spring, so the plant will get going. So, but then, and that was always done in the trial work that Biosecurities did. They were using DAP because guess what? When it comes to buying phosphorus, DAP was usually the cheapest form of buying phosphorus, but at the same time you're getting free nitrogen. What do we need? At that time of year, we actually need some free nitrogen. But then what they found was then coming in with that nitrogen application then in late autumn to basically change the feed quality of not only, in those trials there, we was using tully grass, but it was about changing the feed quality of not only the tully grass but also the rat's tail. So a really cool thing about tropical grasses is that nitrogen availability will actually change the palatability and the softness of the leaf. When nitrogen is deficient, it becomes as coarse as cardboard. When it's in surplus, that same plant that was as coarse as cardboard is as luscious as anything. And it's just the way the plant's leaf structure flexes. And like, there's plenty of examples with that. The brachiaria are really good at showing that. We were talking in the last group, even bladey grass, I've seen it happen too. And yeah, it just comes back to that nitrogen availability. So it's about changing the palatability of that grass. And so what would happen with a tully, because tully's so stoloniferous, we get that grazing right for getting the protein, and so we're grazing the rat's tail, and we're grazing the rat's tail tough nearly to ground because of it was so sweet. And then the tully was going the same way, so then when we respond in the spring, we're coming over. So that's how it was all changing. And it's just basically by changing the palatability and the acceptance of the grass. But that only pays if you can turn that into kilos of beef. And so, you know, we need nitrogen, like we get free nitrogen from the atmosphere, and depending on where we are and what our soil's like, we can mineralise between 30 and 40 kilos of nitrogen pretty well if we've got a good system. Well, that's how we instantly get our free sort of 100 to 120 kilos of live weight gain per hectare a year. And then it's about how we get the rest of those kilos, and that'll either come from fixed nitrogen from legumes. Now, the thing with that is that our legumes, our tropical legumes, will probably fix us 20 kilos of nitrogen per tonne of dry matter. So if we want to really be doing some serious numbers, we've probably got to have, you know, probably got to get to 4 tonne to the hectare of dry matter from our legumes. So then our focus on our production actually doesn't come from managing our grass, it nearly comes from managing our legumes to get that. And so we've got to have our phosphorus and our sulphur and our molybdenum available to get to that kind of production. And then from that, the grasses will get the benefit. There's another 100 kilos of nitrogen fixed from that 4 tonne, give or take. Well, that will then converse, add us another 200 to 300 kilos of live weight gain per hectare. Because the rule of thumb from all the research shows that for every kilo of nitrogen, you'll get 2 to 3 kilos of live weight gain. So I made reference to the trial when I was talking about that was involved in at Proserpine, where we used 365 kilos of live weight gain from a grass legume mix versus 600 from a high nitrogen grass mix. And back in those days, the numbers were stacking up with the nitrogen application. Where it fell over was that urea went to $1,000 a tonne. It was the first time that urea spiked over $1,000 a tonne, and the cattle job dipped to $1.50 a kilo. The gain wasn't there. But if you can, like a couple of years ago when weaners were $4 and $5, it was easy to print cash because urea was still only still $1,000 a tonne, and so we're spending $1 to get, at worst case scenario, 10. You know, that's when we can, and that's when it seriously comes back to it. Like most of our economic assessments that I'll do with my guys, we've got to get a 4-to-1 return before, you know, we're better off probably going to Star City or somewhere and having to go there rather than putting it out in the paddock. But yeah, so that's when you use urea to change the feed quality so we can then get the acceptance, so then we can get the pasture to come across it. Make sense? Got any others? Don't want you waking up at 10 o'clock tonight and going, crap, I wish I had asked that. There's no such thing as a stupid question. I've asked some bloody stupid questions at forums, but I've learnt more out of those. Yes?
Let's just say you're starting from scratch. You just bought somewhere, it's a green food, whatever.
Yep.
Like, say, 85% fibrous, maybe a head.
Yep.
Flowered, you know, it's that kind of thing. Would you suggest then
What type of grass we're talking?
Oh, a bit of everything.
Yeah.
This pane, probably say 10, 15 years out of that. Some has been seeded and some I would say probably natural, so guinea grass, there's legumes like there's some V8 silo in there, there's humid coli, there's signal,
Yeah.
but most of it's 6 to 8 foot tall.
Yep.
And not as fibrous as like hemel grass or whatever else, I'd say it's definitely
Yep.
guinea grass. Would you use your brooding herd to go in and knock it down and kind of play dozer like you said before, and then like with maybe a little urea in there to help them and other goodies, supplement, or would you be saying it's more beneficial to slash that back to half and get it to return a bit?
I would question how much you'd slash back. So if I had that situation first and foremost, I'd be having a serious assessment as to how much actual other like really good pasture species I had in that mix, like, and looking at it going, rightio, it's going to cost me, like, to go and use my cows, it's going to cost me money. Like, and we have to be aware of this, that when we go and use cows as bulldozers, we have to have some molasses there, and we have to have some urea there, so we're not having any animal welfare issues. And so this is where it comes back to having a cost benefit of doing that versus going and slashing. If it was me, I'd actually be running over it with a roller and just trying to get everything onto the ground and then let everything try to come back through that. But I would also then contemplate and go, well, when I go and do that, what does my pasture really look like? And if I could walk around and go, well, do I have, in these kind of systems, we probably want to have 5 to 6, and I'm a big believer in square metres of things, because a square metre anyone can visualise, because all you got to do is spread your legs and look down and go, that's what I've got. And so you go, rightio, what have I got there? Have I got 6 to 8 good grass plants, highly palatable grass plants there? Do I have some legume in with that? And is the cost of me going and nursing that paddock to try to get it to be better worth the while versus going, all right, I'm going to roll it over, or I'm going to do something with the cows? Do I come in and maybe seed something in while the cows are in there to stimulate some better pastures? Do I strip feed that to try to get all that happening, or do I bite the real bullet and go and just spray it out and plant stuff straight back into the mulch again, so I can have a good pasture, the pasture I want, very quickly?
Of stopping seeds from germinating like the undesirables, but aren't you also, you've got to be that little bit cautious, because if you've got too much stacks then you don't have other...
You do. This is where it comes back to what it's situation specific, depending on, anywhere between 2 and 6 tonnes to the hectare of mulch. You can probably get away with it depending on what the mulch is. Some won't be like that, but you've got to look at it across the whole thing, that you could go and just go, oh, bugger it, I'm just going to nurse it. But and I have this argument with people that will go, oh, I'm going to rest and recover till I get a productive pasture. It might take me 10 years to rest and recover. Well, what was my missed opportunity cost of coming in really early and changing my system today and spending a couple $100 now to get myself through? But you've got to know what you've got to start with, and can you actually manage it for even 12 months to get you to optimum production? Because if you don't, you've got to go and do something now. And if that was the case where you could either spray, or if you got too much mulch, well, do you run a roller over it? Do you go and plough that in because you're going to have a whole heap of organic matter? You've got to make a decision and stick to it. There's no perfect situation. The only perfect situation is that as long as it was better than what you're already frigging doing. Yep.
I had it probably 3 times the size of this room behind my current van. I'm flat driving my 500 Polaris through
Yep.
it, and it's of humidity colloid.
Yep.
So I haven't utilised it or even used it in the time frame of owning the property yet.
No.
For one reason was fencing, because I want to break it up 150 acres. I don't want to open slather to them. I want them to concentrate in areas, so I haven't utilised that yet. But do I send them in and try and feed them because it's that funny time for the humidity colloid? Or do I slash it and get it?
No, if I'm at this point in time, I'm in September or October now, and I've got to understand what my limiting factors are. Chances are with my humidity colloid, if it's that thick, I'm going to be pretty low in protein. I'm probably even going to be a bit low on energy, and so I'd be even using a friggin' single hot wire and strip feeding it so I could actually get enough density on it so I could force them to chew it down. Make sure I've got some molasses there so I'm not causing an animal welfare issue, and get them to really hammer it, and because at the end of the day, you're going to get to, once the wet season starts again, that feed's wasted. And it's going to be, it's going to be even worse the following year. So you've got to do something with it. You may as well have mouths on it and just plug the gaps of what you're missing nutrition-wise. Then, if you go and slash it, you're going to in that instance, you'll burn a lot of horsepower to probably not achieve a hell of a lot.
I've only lived, worked down here for over probably 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
So I got used to all that before buying property down here. But coming from Nebo and then coming to here, like what you do up there to what you do down here is a heck of a lot different. The clean and quality and Mother Nature.
Like if it was me and that was my situation, depending on, I'd be nearly. I was talking to someone about this just recently. Actually, I'd be flying a drone over with UAN over my country to change the feed quality up front, so I could lift my protein. But we've got to do the maths on the dollars per unit of UAN versus the gain. But that then I don't have to worry about rainfall, and I don't have to worry about probably even supplementing my cattle. But I've got to work out that partial budget on, does that dollar spent there equal my gain here versus using supplementation instead. But if it was me, that's where I'd be heading. But yeah. And see, now I've got the beauty is now I've got your thinking of what other ways you could do something. And that's all. The thing is, that's all we've got to be doing is thinking of. There is no perfect answer. But it's about doing something, looking at it and going, well, rightio, what can I learn from next time? Because everyone's management's different. At what point in the year one person carves that will suit someone else differently. But it's about thinking and reflecting on what you could do. And, the best way with some Humidicolour is friggin' get some serious density on the stuff. And you probably want to have a larger animal class. Because if it's that thick, don't know if people are aware that you can end up with animal health issues with young stock on brachiaria pastures when they're grazing young shoot. What is it? It's a mycotoxin that lives in the mulch. So never put weaners into thick stuff. You always put your cows in first. Pros and cons. So I better rephrase it. So, slashing. If I had the choice between slashing and mulching, I'd always go mulching. Because slashing, the worst thing about slashing is you take 6 foot of material and turn it into a windrow that's in a foot, and so then we're smothering a foot of grass. We're basically smothering 16% of our grass, within that area. What we can do, but it costs horsepower to do that. So, you're probably looking at guys that can mulch for $40 a hectare. If you ran a roller over your country, you'd be... now, the thing being, a roller, depending on the stem structure of the plant and where it was, is also going to depend on the result you get. But we do it in native grass country, because normally we can't really get too much else over it, and it's just about getting the mulch on the ground. So when it rains, we're getting every drop of moisture into the country. And so those I got guys who run a roller over country for probably $15 a hectare. And you know, as a result of that, if we're doing that, we can actually go and chuck some other seed out in front of it to use that mulch, because it's about using the mulch then to actually use that as a seed bed. But first and foremost, the reason we'd be doing that is just so we've got some ground cover. But if you had the choice in a country that you could traverse with a machine, if you've done that, chances are you're going to probably have reasonably good grasses. They're not going to be annual or natives or annual grasses. You're better off with a slasher or a mulching system, because then you're going to get better utilisation. And you're getting an even more even distribution, like even breakdown of that chopped up mulch, and that's going to cycle back into your country a lot quicker. Yeah, so you always follow the cattle with your slasher or thing, and if you're now, I saw earlier there was highlights from I think it was last year's one where they had Dick Richardson here, and you know Dick would talk about the priority paddocks, and now I was fortunate to spend a bit of time with Dick, but I look back to some of my dairy guys, and one of the things we work on there, which is very similar principles, like so Dick would talk about having that like 1 to 8 paddocks, and then if you got to paddock 4 and paddock 1 was ready to go again, you got to come back here and you leave those sacrifice paddocks. Well, what my dairy farmers blokes would do, we'd go, well, bugger that, let's go and turn that into hay or silage, and because we're going to need that, because we've already seen the feed gap map that we have a problem over here. Well, let's go and turn that into fodder conservation. Yes, it costs us some money, but the alternative is we have to go and buy the stuff later. So then we set that back up. We're back around here, and the system goes again. If it catches us out, well, we go again, and it might be that we cut one of these ones, and then what we do is then the hay that we've conserved, we then feed back in the paddocks that we cut it out of. So that way we're still keeping a closed cycle. So, you know, we'd get better response out of those types of things than we would just by like slashing or mulching beneficial. But yeah, if we can think about it another way and go, well, how can I turn that into a dollar value figure? That's the better or more logical way to do it. And all of a sudden we'll probably triple how much feed we grow in a year. And, you know, and by doing that with them, we also then manage how our daily intake will go because of our bite depth on the grasses and how that feed's presented. You know, particularly if we roll, we're going to end up with a lot of mulch on the ground and our shoots coming through it. We'll get a lot more consumption of stalk, and it comes back to that time that's taken in the rumen for the stalk to break down. So yeah, if we can have it chopped up and onto the ground, well then we're not going to be eating that as much. Yes. Yep. 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 We were talking about this in the other group. If I had my choice with phosphorus, so we've got a couple of things here with phosphorus first and foremost. The question that got posed in the earlier group was, if I can fertilise my country, do I fertilise with phosphorus, and will I get a benefit out of my cattle? And then what do I feed? How do I feed phosphorus to my cattle to get production? And so, answer your first point. If I had clients that were going to feed phosphorus, because I think I mentioned that for AE we needed 7 grams of phosphorus a day just for maintenance, and for that animal to do a kilo we need 22 grams. So if that's the case, we do not want any deterrent from them getting that extra, 15 grams a day. So we don't want any, like, yeah, ideally you want to be feeding straight Kinofos or, or DCP and nothing else. The moment you start adding other stuff to it, well, then there's a deterrent to intake. The moment you get that deterrent to intake, well, then your production starts to drop. So ideally, you don't want to be having 15 different things in there that are going to limit production, because all you end up doing is getting a whole heap of nothing and not a lot of anything. Yeah. So, and look, the cattle will still, if the cattle need, you'll find instances where cattle will gorge even if there is a bittering agent, because they'll be chasing it. But, then this poses the question that if I've got grass country, they've got breeders on that, I've got this, cattle need phosphorus. You look at it, the agronomist in me goes, well, if I'm missing that, what am I missing out on as far as carrying capacity wise, production wise, by having that phosphorus in my pasture to grow more pasture first and foremost, to have my 0.2% phosphorus per kilogram of dry matter, and then I can rest assured that I can get in close to my daily requirement of phosphorus, and then my little bit that I need can come from a supplementation. But if we don't have the phosphorus in the grass, we don't get the responsiveness from the rainfall, we don't get the legume production, we don't get all those other factors. So then I'm reliant upon getting it down the throat of an animal. And I like to have all my bases covered. And so that's where the catch is. It opens Pandora's box that, yes, you might have to go and spend 150, 200 bucks a hectare on, say, fertilising with P, but the long-term benefit of that will probably outweigh in production-wise and feeding. Yep. 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 Yeah. If it is a bittering, like depending on what the sulphur is in it, it may be a bittering agent, but yeah, it depends on what source is. Phosphorus. Yeah, but they'll also gorge to catch up, and then they will plateau as well. Yeah, so I used the example in the last group where I had a guy in buffel country west of the range, and it was supposed to be pretty good phosphorus country, and he wanted to do a trial on his weaner heifers one year. He could never hit his weaner heifers could never hit the Coles feedlot job in September, October. So he said, well, I've got to do something. And we said, let's give some phosphorus a go. We had green feed. So over 100 days, I think he worked out they had 50 kilos of phosphorus a head. Like, it was ridiculous. But it was $1 a kilo. Those heifers weighed an extra 50 kilos than what they normally would. So we got on the, they ate their weight and weight and phosphorus basically, but it was $1 a kilo for the phosphorus, and he picked up $3.50 a kilo on the animal. So it was bad. Well, it ended up they're actually too heavy for the job that he was looking for. But it showed that his country, whilst it was buffel country and west of the range, there was more phosphorus. They needed more phosphorus than what anyone else would ever dream of. And it was interesting, their consumption was, they gorged to play catch up, and then they plateaued out. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. No. Yeah. 3% might not hurt them, but it's also, if it's enough of a deterrent. Yeah. Well, sulphur can be a bitter agent, but sulphur then can also help control with flies and worms and all those other things too. But if you know what your what your limiting factor is, well, that's what you plug it with. You don't try and plug it with a few different things, because we're talking about free choice supplementation, especially with minerals. It's a bit different with urea and energy types of things, but with just those minerals, you're better off having them as a free choice rather than having it mixed all together, because you'll either restrict consumption on the things that you want, or you'll go the opposite way and they'll gorge like crazy because they're chasing the really expensive cheap trace mineral. and then it becomes expensive. And the human nature says when we start feeding cattle, especially supplementation, they're bloody eating too much, it's costing me too much, I've got to screw down how much they're eating. But salt can also be can also increase appetite. And the other thing with salt, we have salt. When it comes to all our supplementation, we have to understand what's in our grass, what's in our soil, and what's in our water. And it's all a big cycle. And one thing that probably people don't realise, for every kilo of dry matter that a beast consumes, they can need up to 5 to 6 litres of water for that kilo of dry matter. So it's about having clean, fresh water to ensure that we get that. And then if we've got all the right trace, if we've got salts and that in there, well then we're halfway there. When you start looking at what's in a water test, and if I'm drinking 60 litres of water a day, well I'm actually getting a fair bit in some of those salts anyway. But yeah, if you don't know what's in there, well, you sort of, again, you're flying blind. I can hear some cogs running around. Yes? First and foremost, I want to understand what he wants to achieve out of it. Sometimes, there's lots of different choices you can make in planting a pasture. Is it a paddock that I'm going to use at a certain time of the year, and so I need a growth curve that's different to something else? So that'd be the first part of it. Then it's about what else am I looking to achieve out of it. Do I want to be able to, do I want to be able to cut hay for it for some fodder conservation as well as using it for a pasture, or is it 100% pasture? Am I looking to be able to suppress for weeds? Am I mindful of things like dieback? They're those kind of factors that I'm looking at. What's my pH and my soil, because then that's going to implement on some of the species that I choose, because some have got greater acid tolerance than others. What's the presence of salt in the soil, because that's going to determine the species that I plant. And how good's my grazing management going to be? Because there's no point going. I always say there's no point me going and planting a Rolls Royce pasture if you're going to manage it like a mini moke. I may as well just plant a mini moke pasture if he's going to manage it that way, because the best pasture is still ordinary if managed ordinary. I try to, and it's probably why I only have a select few clients that because I sift a lot, because it's about really optimising what we grow. And so, yeah, that's probably the process there, Jerry. But it's about understanding what their expectations are when we need that feed. Is it for specific use? What are our constraints? What are our opportunities? And then from there, we start playing selection games. If you asked me 5, or if you asked me 10 years ago, what would be the things that I would first look for in a pasture, and its palatability and persistence and all that. Now, the first thing that comes to my mind when we start looking at pastures is what is its resistance to dieback, first and foremost. Because to me, like dieback, if we've got a mixed pasture sward with grass and legumes, we're not going to get our pants pulled down properly. But if I go and plant the wrong grass species, and we have dieback come through, I may as well go and do a nudie run through the MCG, because that's how I'm going to feel, because I'm going to have no grass. So to me, I want to be planting species that are tolerant, or known to have tolerance to dieback these days. I can manage the rest after that. Yes, 2 minutes ago. Oh, righto. That's all good. Any more questions? anyone that's going tomorrow, you'll have plenty of chance to hit me with plenty that you would have come up with. But I hope you walk away with something. Like, I have a goal whenever I do an event that the attendees need to walk away with at least one thing that they didn't know when they come, because you know, if you take a day off work or out of your business, that comes at a cost. And so it's about thinking about that. Well, it might have cost, the opportunity cost was $300 or $400. Well, I want you to walk home with something that you can take home with that knowledge and turn that into $3,000 or $30,000 by just picking up on something.